Hello. I'd like to talk to you for the next few minutes about helicopter capabilities and limitations, things the helicopter can and cannot do. These are very important for you to know as the passenger. Subjects we'll cover will be the flight controls, we'll touch on aerodynamics, hovering in and out of ground effect, emergency procedures, weight and balance, and of course density altitude. Come on aboard. There are four primary flight controls. The first is the cyclic, flown with the right hand. The second is the collective on the left side of the pilot. This one includes the throttle on this particular model. And down below we have the anti-torque pedals. Through manipulating of these controls, the pilot is able to fly the helicopter. When the pilot moves the cyclic forward, this tilts the rotor disc the same direction. This redirects lift and thrust, moving the helicopter forward. As the cyclic is moved backward, the rotor disc tilts to the rear and the helicopter moves backward. The same is true for movement to the left and to the right. The collective, at the pilot's left side, controls the up and down movement of the helicopter. As the collective is raised, the pitch of the main rotor blades is increased collectively. More lift is generated, and the helicopter goes up. When the pilot lowers the collective, lift is reduced, so the helicopter descends. The throttle is also located on the collective. In turbine helicopters, the pilot uses this during startup and shutdown of the engine. A governor controls proper engine RPM during flight. At the pilot's feet are the anti-torque pedals. These control the thrust of the tail rotor. The tail rotor counteracts torque created by the main rotor and keeps the helicopter from spinning. The anti-torque pedals also provide directional control, left and right, when the helicopter is in a stable hover. When the pilot pushes the left pedal, the helicopter rotates to the left. The right pedal causes a turn to the right. Now let's talk about helicopter performance. A condition called ground effect generally improves the capabilities of helicopters. Simply put, when a helicopter is within 1/2 rotor diameter from the ground, it is called hovering in ground effect, HIGI. A cushion of air has been created between the ground and the helicopter, increasing lift and reducing power requirements, providing the surface is relatively smooth and level. Rough terrain, ridge tops, or pinnacles may reduce or even eliminate the advantages of ground effect. Once the helicopter exceeds the 1/2 rotor diameter distance above the ground, the cushion of air dissipates and you are now hovering out of ground effect, HOGI. To maintain a hover, the helicopter must now use considerably more power, reducing its effective payload. As you can see, the helicopter is much more efficient when you can use in-ground effect sites for your takeoffs and landings. And if you must use an out-of-ground effect site, the number of people or pounds of cargo you want to carry may have to be reduced drastically. A normal takeoff consists of bringing the helicopter up to an in-ground effect hover and translating the helicopter into forward flight. Additional lift is created as the helicopter moves from the turbulent air created from hovering to undisturbed or clean air in forward flight. This is called translational lift. Translational lift occurs at about 15 to 18 miles per hour. Translational lift will also be produced when hovering with a 15 or more mile per hour steady headwind. The wind blows the turbulent air away and provides clean air and more lift for the helicopter. This is why pilots prefer to take off and land into the wind. When the helicopter must hover out of ground effect, HOGE, to enter or leave a confined area, or to clear a tall obstacle without the benefit of translational lift, this is called a maximum performance takeoff or landing. During this maneuver, the helicopter is totally power dependent and margins of safety are reduced. So whenever possible, try and avoid these types of landing areas. What are the helicopter's capabilities in the event of an emergency? An engine failure, for instance? Engine failures in turbine helicopters are very rare. However, should one occur, a helicopter is capable of auto-rotation to a safe landing. A good thing to know if you're a passenger. During powered flight, air flows through the rotor system from the top and out the bottom. Helicopters have a free wheeling unit which automatically allows the main rotor to rotate freely if the engine fails or there is some other mechanical emergency. The rotor system then maintains flight RPM by reversed airflow. The pilot has full control of the helicopter during this maneuver, as I will now demonstrate for you in this practice auto-rotation. Here I have completely lowered the collective and removed all power to the rotor system. The helicopter descends rapidly at this point. As I approach the landing site, I ease back on the cyclic, raise the helicopter's nose, and slow the forward airspeed and rate of descent. Now, I level the helicopter, and using the stored up inertia in the rotor blades, I cushion it to the ground, completing the auto-rotation. Each helicopter model has a chart called the height velocity diagram. This chart shows the combination of airspeed and altitude from which a safe auto-rotation can be made. As you can see, the safest flying is done above 500 feet and at cruise airspeed. This is not to say, do not go low and slow. Just limit your flying in this area to only that is necessary to get your job done. Remember to assume the emergency position during any auto-rotation from any height. Now let's talk about density altitude and its effect on aircraft performance. Density altitude, by definition, is pressure altitude, or elevation, corrected for temperature and humidity. Air is said to be thin at higher elevations. That is, there are fewer air molecules per cubic foot at 10,000 feet than there are at sea level. Also, as air is heated, it expands, and you can get fewer molecules of warm air in 1 cubic foot than you can cool air. In effect, warm air is also thin. So, as you go up in altitude and temperature, density altitude also goes up. At lower density altitudes, such as sea level on a cool day, the rotor blades are moving through dense air, creating maximum lift at lower power settings. When the density altitude goes up, the air thins out. The rotor blades have less air to grab, and the pilot must increase power. Helicopter performance and capabilities decrease. So, during the warm summer months, plan your helicopter projects for early morning when the air is cool to maximize the performance of your helicopter. And when you add hover out of ground effect landings, or HOGE, to your project, just remember this saying: when it's high, HOGE, and hot, you may not carry a heck of a lot. Finally, we need to discuss weight and balance. At any given altitude and temperature, by manufacturer specifications, a helicopter can only carry a certain amount of weight. The pilot must determine this weight based on the current conditions by doing load calculation from his aircraft flight manual, prior to the flight. This weight, or payload, must not be exceeded. Accurate weights of passengers and cargo are an absolute necessity for the pilot to properly load the helicopter. Once this allowable payload has been determined, the pilot must then balance it aboard the helicopter. If you draw an imaginary line through the helicopter, at the middle of the rotor system, this is what is known as the center of gravity, or CG. To maintain the best and safest flying characteristics, the pilot has to balance the load on the helicopter. If the CG is too far to the rear or aft, the helicopter flies with a nose-up attitude. If the CG is too far forward, then the nose tilts down. In either case, control movements are difficult and maneuverability is decreased, not desirable if an emergency should occur. The same is true for lateral CG, or side-to-side loading. Try to keep all weight evenly distributed. If in doubt, ask the pilot where to sit or place and secure all cargo. I hope this program has helped you understand a helicopter's capabilities and limitations, and that you can use this knowledge in your future use of helicopters. Stay alert and enjoy your flying.
Personal protective equipment, PPE, what is it? Well, it's things we can wear to protect ourselves when we fly. Things like flight helmets, fire-resistant clothing, gloves, boots, hearing protection, and eye protection. Well, what's required when we fly special use? You got to have the helmet, fire-resistant clothing, gloves, and the boots. Let's talk about fire-resistant clothing. You've got a choice here. You can either go with the full one-piece Nomex flight suit like this, or if you prefer, the Nomex fire shirt and fire pants. They both are equally as effective. It's your choice. Now, what you wear underneath is really important. Something like this 100% cotton t-shirt works great. Provides an extra layer of protection, and it doesn't burn or melt like a synthetic fabric does. So always stick with natural fibers underneath your flight suit or fire clothes. If you're going to wear the protective clothing, you need to know how to wear it right. What's right? Well, let's start with the sleeves. Sleeves should be down over your flight gloves and securely fastened. Next thing you want to make sure is that your flight suit or your fire shirt is zipped or buttoned clear to the top, and that your collar's turned up. The name of the game here is protection. You're trying to protect yourself against the possibility of a post-crash flash fire. So you protect yourself as much as you can. Also, if you've got zippers in your pants legs, zip them down to where they're snug at the bottom. What about gloves? What I've got on here is probably about the best you can do, and that's the Nomex and leather combination flight glove. 100% leather works very well too, offers good protection. What you do want to avoid is a synthetic-based glove, something that in a post-crash fire may burn and melt. Even 100% wool is not going to offer the protection you need. Also, if you're going to wear the gloves, make sure they're serviceable. Check them for holes, torn seams. If they've got any kind of that, they've lost their integrity, and they're not going to offer you the protection that you need. What if your protective clothing gets dirty? What do? Well, to maintain its integrity, it has to be clean. A dirty flight suit, dirty flight gloves can support flame, so you need to keep it clean. In the case of the gloves, it's as simple. Just put the gloves on, grab a bar of soap, and wash your hands. Wring the gloves out and let them dry in a cool place for a couple of days. That's all it takes. As far as the flight suit goes, throw it in the washer and wash it like you would anything that's dirty. Here's a good example. This is Corky's race car. As you can see, he's had a problem here. He's hit the wall, he's got a fireball going, the car is spun and come to a stop, and it's on fire. If you look real close right here, you can see a dark shadow. That's Corky himself coming out of the burning car. Now that he's outside of the car, what do you see? He's perfectly protected. He has on everything he needs. He's got Nomex suit, he's got Nomex shoes, socks, Nomex gloves, and a face protector and a helmet. Very well protected, but what do you see here? His hands are on fire. His hands are on fire because his gloves were dirty. He had Nomex gloves, but he had been working on the car. He got dirt and grime in them, and that's what's supporting the fire. He had disabling injuries to his hands, and he never drove again. Just a reminder, if you're going to wear it, keep it clean. What's the requirement for boots? Well, first of all, they have to be all leather. Second, they need to be tall enough so when you're in a sitting position in the aircraft, there's no gap between the top of the boot and the bottom of your Nomex. The idea here is protection. Protection from that post-crash flash fire. Also, remember, no synthetic boots. No nylon leather mix. That nylon or synthetic can melt in that fire situation. Talk about eye protection. That visor on your flight helmet, it's built to protect your eyes and your face. It should be down all the time, anytime you're flying, and at least during the takeoff and the landing phase. Take a look at this visor. You notice that it's got some damage to it. This visor was taken from the helmet of a Fish and Wildlife pilot who was in a mishap a few years back. The engine lost power and he had to do a forced landing. This was the outcome. As the aircraft impacted the ground, pieces and parts of the engine, the cowling, the propeller came through the windshield and into the cockpit, actually glancing off the pilot's helmet. The visor saved his eyesight. They work. Use them. What about when you're working around the helicopter? During takeoff and landing, in a remote situation where you've got dust and dirt coming up from the rotor wash. You need to protect your eyes in that situation too. Either stay back, out of the way of the rotor wash. If you have to get in close, wear eye protection. Put the visor down on your helmet. Wear goggles, whatever it takes. These machines can throw a lot of things your way, and it could injure your eyes. Again, the name of the game is protection. Noisy, right? Let me talk to you about hearing. Hearing is something that over a period of time, you lose a little bit today, a little bit tomorrow, a little bit next week, and it doesn't come back. It's a cumulative thing. Over a number of years working around the noise of helicopters and airplanes and anything else loud or noisy like that, you can lose the hearing in your ears. So, when you're in that environment, wear your helmet. SPH, Sound Protection Helmet. Or wear earplugs or earmuffs. Anything you can do to save your hearing. Your instructor is going to demonstrate to you the proper wearing and fit of the flight helmet. But I'd like to share with you a couple of things that I consider to be very important. One thing you need to remember, when you put the helmet on, fasten the chin strap. Adjust it snug. It's useless without it. the helmet won't stay on your head in the event of a crash. So the helmet's on and it's fastened snug. Okay, another thing to remember, just as a pointer, is that this is called a lip mic. You adjust the microphone down right where it's just about touching your lip. That's about right. If you can reach out and touch it with your lip, it's in the proper position. Also, don't forget the visor down and locked. This is an expensive piece of equipment. It's got delicate avionics in it. It belongs one of two places, either on your head or in the bag. This is a game of chance. Accidents still happen. It could happen to you. Don't take chances. Make the right choice. Wear your PPE.
On September 14, 1992, I was involved in an aircraft accident. I was working with National Park Service, along with another seasonal ranger, Patty, and the Park Service pilot, Bruce. And we were flying in a 185 Cessna on floats, and we're on a routine hunting patrol.
I was a pilot and I had 2 observers on board with me. We stopped at this lake. We've been flying for a couple hours to get out and take a break.
Before we landed on that lake, we were going to land on a certain lake prior to that, but there was ice on that lake. So what we did was we went a few more miles and picked this other lake, which is a pretty remote lake, pretty small lake almost, like a big pond. We had a real good landing. It was a little bit breezy, maybe 15-mile-an-hour winds. But as soon as we landed and got out, there was already ice starting to form on the floats of the plane. We got back into the plane and, it was still getting a little bit more icy. It was pretty cold out. It was about 25 degrees, and now the winds were picking up a little.
And the wind really picked up and became gusty and turbulent.
Like Stan said, everything, things started to ice up. That was a real concern of Bruce's. Bruce was scraping off the ice on the window, and he was checking the rudders and just making sure there was no ice.
I sailed back to the south end of the lake here and began my takeoff run.
He started going across the water.
The plane was taking off rather normal.
The left float got off of the water.
The aircraft rolled gently to the right, and it overturned.
The wing hit the water, the whole plane just flipped forward. And then sitting in the front seat, I saw the water, what appeared the water coming up, but we were flipping over.
I had opened my door as soon as I felt that the airplane was going to overturn. As it turned out, this was very advantageous to our survival. It expedited us getting out of the airplane.
And it just kind of rolled right over. And luckily, Bruce opened his door before we completely flipped over.
As soon as we flipped over, I realized once I was upside down, hanging by my seatbelt, what had happened. And at that point, I still wasn't real worried about the situation. I knew what had happened, but I wasn't quite in a panic yet. And then almost immediately, the water started rushing in. And remember, I was upside down. The door wouldn't open. I couldn't push it open. I didn't think of opening the window. I didn't think of kicking the window out. The only thing I thought of was, okay, I know the door on the other side is open. I'll just go out that door. I started to panic a little bit because I was underwater and I knew the fuselage was full, and I didn't know what was really in my way.
My first reaction when I got out of that plane was to swim to shore. Bruce grabbed me and he yanked me and he got me up onto the floats, and he said, pull your life vest. I did not pull my life vest. I wasn't thinking about that. The very beginning of that plane accident is really, it was real traumatic for me.
I inflated Patty's jacket. My life jacket did not inflate. I had an inflatable Stearns jacket on.
And I didn't even think of inflating my jacket until he said that. It just didn't even strike me, even though I swam from the plane up.
The wind chill was down around 15 to 20 below zero, and we were completely wet at this point. I knew that if we stayed on the floats, that due to our exposure, we'd be dead. Probably, I don't know if we could have survived a couple hours on there.
Bruce asked if all three of us were ready to swim. We would not make it if we stayed on those floats. You know, we would die of exposure, hypothermia. And at that point, I was feeling like I'm not going to leave these floats. I'm going to stay on these floats until somebody finds us. And I just felt like I couldn't swim those 75 or 100 yards. And he finally talked me into swimming. We decided we were going to do this together.
And I was real scared at that point. No one knows we're here. It's not like we wrecked, we get to shore and someone comes and saves us. It's not going to be that easy. It was hard to be decisive to even make a decision. You know, I could feel the hypothermia start to come in.
He made that decision for us. I mean,
he
took charge. He said, you know, we're either going to stay on these floats together and die together, which we don't want to do, or we're going to swim to shore. And we decided to swim to shore together, and we were going to stay together. Bruce and I were pretty much swimming alongside each other, and Stan was somewhere behind us a little bit, but not too far.
And I started realizing, you know, I'm not doing too well. So while I was floating on my back, just getting a little break, trying to, you know, breathe again from choking, my body felt totally numb, especially my arms and my legs, feet and hands especially. And then all of a sudden, all the pain, you know, the pain of the water and the pain of the swimming, the pain of the stress was all going away. And it was a really light feeling. It just felt so easy. It's like, okay, this can all be over. It can be so easy. All I have to do here is just keep laying on my back, and it's just like I'm going to fall asleep, and it's going to be real easy, and it's going to be over. It wasn't really even scary at that time. I wasn't scared. I wasn't in pain. I wasn't even tired anymore. It was just relaxing. And then it hit me that, you know, what I was thinking, because still I was hypothermic at the time, and I could tell I was still thinking slow. And then it struck me that hey, yeah, it will. I'll be here, and it'll be all over, but then I'll be dead. And then it got to that's when it struck me that the feeling I was having was the feeling of death.
I recall about midway through the swim to shore, I just started becoming numb, totally numb. I couldn't feel my arms anymore, my legs. And I started becoming lethargic. I got to the point where I could feel myself kind of, you know, my head started dropping, and my eyes started closing a little bit. I was drifting away. And I started thinking to myself, this must be death. This is the start of death. And right before I closed my eyes, I had visions. I had two visions. I had a vision of my mom at my funeral, and I had a vision of all three of us floating on that lake, and the people flying over, my friends flying over, and seeing us there, dead. And for some reason, those two visions made me come to life again, or just gave me a whole different perspective on a whole different strength. And and from that point on, it was all positive. We're going to do this. I started yelling, I remember, at Bruce, we're going to make it. We're going to do it. And I kept yelling this. I'm going to do it. We're going to do it. We're going to do it.
But I could hear Patty yelling, and that also helped a lot and gave me the motivation to keep going, because I didn't know if they were there or not, or if I was going the right way, or, but then when I heard them, it kept giving me the motivation to go, and basically the thought, well, hey, if they made it, I can make it too.
Even though when we got to shore, we were extremely hypothermic, pretty much clubbed from the knees and elbows down. I wasn't able to stand the first couple times that I tried to here on the shore. So Stan came into shore shortly after Patty and I got here, and that was a tremendous relief to me just to know that we had all survived to shore. But at that point, we were in a real possible death situation because of our exposure, and because we're so remote here, the chance of being located quickly was very difficult.
We met together on shore and started following Bruce up. And Bruce came upon a real sheltered cut bank, dirt cut bank off of the lake.
Bruce found a good little sheltered area that would keep us out of the wind.
What Bruce started doing was he started gathering dried moss and dried grass, but we couldn't. It's like we couldn't grab anything because our hands were just shaking. We were just so cold.
At that point, my clothes were starting to freeze, and my hair was actually frozen. I can remember. My hair was frozen solid.
Stan and I began gathering dry willow, and the willow that was around, there wasn't a whole lot, but we got enough to at least start our fire. And we took out our matches, and our matches supposedly were waterproof matches. The matches, I guess, were fine, but what we struck them on was saturated with water, and that deteriorates it. So, it was useless anyway. And luckily, Bruce had a magnesium striker.
And then we got a little fire started.
The fire itself was very small. I mean, it was no bigger than about 8 inches across. And it's amazing how little of a fire you can have to keep you going.
And I really believe that fire probably saved our lives. Without the fire, I don't think that we would have survived.
It was just knowing that I had to keep this fire going in order to survive.
Once we got that fire going, we realized, okay, we're going to live, we're going to make it.
We told ourselves we're going to stay up all night, we're not going to go to sleep right now.
That concept, honestly scared me, spending the night there, just because, it was just a fear of the unknown. What's going to happen? Is it going to get colder? Is it going to snow? Are we going to fall asleep and die? Or is the fire going to go out?
We had this tiny little fire, and Stan and Bruce and I were just honkered around it.
We were trying to get the fronts of our bodies around the fire just to dry out, but we were mainly concerned with our hands and our feet.
Have never been as cold for a sustained period of time as I was that night, and we were all probably as miserable as we had ever been or may ever be.
We constantly communicated, and that's what kept me going. I had no doubt in my mind that we were not going to make it. I knew we were.
But the positive outlook was really good. That's what really kept us strong, kept us going. Just us being together and us being positive together. It was just strong enough to keep us going.
And we knew that it was important to keep a positive frame of mind and really believe that we were going to survive the situation.
We stayed up all night talking and singing and just keeping each other going, keeping each other warm, trying to keep a real good frame of mind about it.
But we spoke a lot about trying to figure out the scenario of what they're thinking of in Kotzebue, what they're thinking of at headquarters. How are they going to rescue us? When are they going to figure out we're gone? How are they going to rescue us? How much time are they going to get? Are they going to find us? Bruce understood the way the plane usually goes and caught to view, and how these searches usually progress. You know, the planes wouldn't come out at night, but they would, you know, probably come out in the morning. Bruce didn't really seem to be fluctuating. He seemed to be, you know, just stuck in that shiver stage.
I think that I probably didn't regain my body heat quite as quickly as the other two people. It was just so cold.
Well, he had the cotton socks, which were soaked, and his feet were just ice. So I tried to rub his feet, but they didn't seem to be getting very warm.
Since his core temperature seemed to stay low and he wasn't really recovering, he stayed around the fire most of the night. Bruce would keep the fire going because that was very important to us, to always keep that fire going for any reason.
Yeah, and I think that really helped out as far as his, you know, his morale or whatever.
And it would be probably at least into the next day before there were search aircraft possibly here to locate us.
Or something? Was that a plane? Then we started hearing planes in the distance.
We could hear aircraft searching to the west of us, and we heard an aircraft come from the east.
One of them sounded like they were coming towards us, and then it just veered off behind us. We never saw it. We heard it really loudly. And while we realized, okay, that plane is not going to come find us. The second time, again, we heard a plane. We ran up the hill, and it went up. It was up another drainage, you know, just in front of us. So we were sort of in the center. There was one behind us and one in front of us that went up two different drainages, but we were sort of just in this little void.
You know, the planes were out there and they were looking for us, but they were just missing us. At those times, that's where we got, you know, at least I felt myself, morale at least go way down, get real frustrated and actually real angry. You know, just at the whole situation, angry, just at the situation in general, just because of the sheer frustration.
We were real disappointed about that, but we were still real hopeful until it started to become dusk that evening. I felt like we were very vulnerable here. A cold front or a storm coming down could literally kill us quite easily. And so when we weren't going to be located that second night, I became very concerned.
Well, why aren't they here? Why aren't they up the Noatak? We figured, you know, if the search planes are going to come out, they're going to go straight up the Noatak. How could they go wrong? There's something wrong. What's going on? Didn't they, you know, why aren't they here? We hear them off in the distance, but why aren't they here? And so it was kind of like the morale that we picked up all night by being so sure. It's like, okay, all we got to do is make it through the night and they'll get us in the morning. And so it was kind of like a big letdown, disappointment.
The airplanes that were out there weren't seeming to find them right away, and so I got kind of concerned that it might be more serious than our initial thoughts. Since I had flown for the Park Service before and knew the area pretty well, I thought maybe I could be of some assistance. I knew the flight plan. I talked to Warren, and I knew the flight plan, and I knew the mission they were on because I'd done it myself. I knew they were doing a hunter survey. And as we proceeded up the middle Noatak, I noticed a party of hunters and decided that they might be have some information. So I landed on a gravel bar and talked to them, and yeah, they described the airplane approximately when it passed over. They even noticed there was 3 people in it. So I thought, well, this is working out. And they told me which direction they were going, what the wind, what the weather was, and so on. So I figured, well, maybe the hunters are the best source of information. So I started up the river, and I stopped and talked to a total of 6 different hunting parties. And every one of them got me closer and closer to in the right direction. And as I approached Mockpick Creek, I don't know why I went up to check that lake up on the bluff, I didn't think they'd be there because there's no hunters up there, but I thought, well, what the hell, I'm here, I'll swing by there.
We're just sitting around the fire, and then all of a sudden...
out of nowhere, we heard the plane.
We heard a Super Cub coming low from the west, and I'd given everybody the flares, aerial flares, and both Stan and I shot flares at the airplane.
We ran up, and we're waving and making all kinds of commotion and shooting the flare off.
And when I swung by, I found the floats of the 185 inverted in the lake. And we flew along the south shore of the lake and didn't see any survivors, didn't see any bodies. So we were concerned that they were still in the airplane. And at that time, Patty and Stan came out of the willows where they'd been trying to stay warm. Of course, we felt pretty good about that.
Yeah, well, first of all, seeing the plane, that's what really picked us up, because we knew where we were at, and we knew the Park Service knew where we were at. We knew that we could be located.
We could see from passing over them that they had no survival gear at all, that all they had was the clothes they were wearing. So I knew they had swam from shore, so I knew they must have been pretty miserable. So we tossed out every bit of survival gear we had in the airplane, and Victor threw out his coveralls.
He was a lifesaver for that.
And they told us then that the helicopter was coming in. But we didn't take anything for granted. Even though the two planes came in, they said the helicopter was coming in. And then finally the helicopter came in. And even at that point, when me and Bruce left the fire pit down, we still never put the fire out. We still never took anything for granted. It was kind of like our trust was, our trust was shaken that day. And we didn't trust anything. We didn't trust that the helicopter would run out of gas or wreck or whatever. So, we just realized it was very important. We were taking no chances at that point.
We stayed with our gear until the EMT, the two EMT guys came in, and we were hauling all of our gear into the helicopter and got all that taken care of and got into the helicopter, and then they started checking us out.
And then when we got to Kotzebue, everyone was there waiting for us.
I'm glad to say that it worked out the way it did. I was overjoyed, elated when I saw that the three of them were all right.
It was her first helicopter flight. A survey mission into the crater of Mount St. Helens. Things were going well until, during the takeoff, erratic winds caused the helicopter to spin, catch a skid on rocky terrain, and roll over. She was sitting in the right rear seat behind the pilot. As the helicopter rolled, her door came open. The inertia of the roll thrust her head out the open door. Her head was trapped between the helicopter and the ground during the rollover. She was wearing this flight helmet. It sustained over 2,000 pounds of impact force. Yet she suffered only a headache and tender spots on her head for a few days. The flight helmet saved her life. The remote landing site was over 11,000 feet. It was a special use mission. The 4 passengers were from 3 different bureaus. There wasn't enough PPE for everyone. It was only a 15-minute flight. Just this one time, they said. The helicopter manager gave in to the group. They took the flight. At the landing site, the helicopter began to spin. The pilot lost control and the aircraft crashed. With the blade still turning, the transmission broke from its mounts, entered the cabin area, and battered 2 of the rear seat passengers, knocking them both unconscious for a period of time. The Heli-TAC crew member sitting in the forward-facing seat received the brunt of the beating. He was wearing this flight helmet. It saved his life. The other passenger was wearing this ball cap. He remained unconscious for some time with a concussion and a severely lacerated scalp. He continues to have blackouts to this day. These helmets have one thing in common. They save someone's life. Think about it. It's your choice. It may be your life.